What is up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Not So Stupid podcast. In today's episode, we have Nicole Peters joining us. Nicole Peters is a coach and mentor that helps powerhouse women achieve the things they want to achieve in less time with much less effort and much less stress, using her Plan Your Perfect Week system. She specializes in time management and productivity from a feminine energy perspective, showing women what time and money can be made and saved when you have all of your priorities in order and you are in tune with your body. And although she specializes with women, there's a lot that men can take away from this as well. I know I took a lot away from this, and I started implementing a lot of what I learned in this conversation with her directly after we got off the chat. So I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this one and finally take control of your week, take charge of your time and the things you want to accomplish, and become so much more productive. So without further ado, here is the interview with Nicole Peters. All right, Nicole Peters, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I know you're a wealth of knowledge in this specific realm, and I can't wait for the people to hear what you have to say. But before we get into all of that, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you're at, and what you do?
Yeah, so I am a women's business mentor, productivity, time management coach. I love to say that I help women accomplish their dreams in half the time they thought it would take. That notoriously happens in my coaching and in my programs, but where I came from was not the coaching industry. I came from a design background where I got an undergrad in industrial design, so that was designing physical products like the microphone here or the stand or even the computer. We were taught how to research people, research their psychology, research their desires, their buying patterns, and figure out what they wanted to purchase and use in their homes. And that was the biggest interest for me when I was in undergrad, was the people. So when I got out into the industry and started actually designing products, I was like, this isn't as fun for me because I'm not in front of as many people as I would like to be. I kind of lost that people element when I went into the industry. So I went back to school and essentially was in I guess you could call it a creative MBA program. They call it service design in the UK. That's like a creative business design degree. And that really allowed me to switch my focus from physical products and go into digital products. And in the digital realm, it was my experience that there was just much more rich of an industry that was based off of people and their thinking and how they wanted to use software and digital products. So I got more hands-on with people when I went that route. Eventually, I ended up getting very obsessed with coaching and psychology and healing. And so I eventually left the industry altogether and went 100% into coaching and got a beautiful opportunity as a chief product officer at a tech company, actually, for a little while. What that really allowed me to do was have my own team, was to really understand from a very high performance level, from a business perspective, how everything worked on the back end of the business, how everything worked on the front end of the business, fulfilling services for clients. And I really got to understand how my leadership would affect my team and how that would affect the clients and the overall results that we would get them. One thing in particular that I got to focus on the most was leadership, running my team, communication, and then understanding how to track people's performance and understanding how to eliminate places in the business where waste was happening. And when I say waste, this could be where somebody was distracted, unmotivated, and taking way too long to do a task, or waste, like we're spending X more dollars on this one service than we actually really need to. How can we optimize what we're doing? How can we optimize what you're doing and save money for the business and ultimately have everyone win at the same time, right? So it was always my goal to have a win-win situation. I don't really like it when a business will cut costs and then it also cuts the happiness of the people. I think that we can do both. And so when I left that position, I went straight back into coaching 100%. And it's just been my love to help women understand how to organize their minds, how to get in touch with what they really want and desire, and understand why are they not accomplishing those big goals, those big dreams that they've been wanting for so long. Let's say like a woman's been wanting to write a book and she's like jealous that she sees all her other girlfriends in the industry getting bestsellers when she has a stack of scribbles on her desk still. You know, I want to ask why. What are the elements in your life and in your mindset that is having you not able to really fully put yourself into these goals?
I love that. I love that. So you had a lot of experience basically working on making things as efficient as possible, whether that's teams or products and that kind of thing. And basically now you're helping women become more efficient with their use of time and how they speak to themselves and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I love how you said that, their use of time. And that is one of the most fun parts for me because time is such an intangible thing to work with. But we can't argue how awesome it feels when we have a goal that we thought would take 12 months to happen, and it happens in literally 24 hours because we shifted how we viewed time and how we were able to work with time.
Yeah. So what is that shift exactly? What is the, I guess, mainstream version of time, and what is this time perspective that you show people?
I was just saying a minute ago, I love your questions and I'm not sure how I'm going to answer them. This one I really, really love. So the mainstream concept of time, in my opinion, is that time is a resource that runs out. We all die eventually. Everything ends eventually. And you could take two perspectives there. You could take a pessimistic, scared, scarcity version of that and run with it, or you could take almost like a reverent perspective, like seeing that as a really bittersweet truth and understanding that, oh, if we have a limited amount of time, then what amazing things could I do with that time while I'm here? So again, going back to mainstream, a lot of people, and of course, all of the women who come to me at first have this mainstream perspective of, I don't have enough time. I have all these things to do. There's not enough time. I had 10 things on my to-do list. I only got 5 done. I'm going to have to take it into the weekend, right? You can kind of sense in my language, like this like,
You're like trapped.
Yeah, I'm like trapped. I feel burdened. I don't feel in control. And that is what I experienced the mainstream understanding of time. And you asked about the shift. What was your question about the shift again?
Yeah. So what's the perspective shift that you give on that? So like you mentioned, it's this like a sand timer, basically. It's just going to run out at some point. And that puts people in a position of like overwhelm and I can't get anything I want done. What is that shift to help them break free of that?
So the shift happens in multiple phases.
Okay.
I would love to say the shift is just like, change your mind around this one thing.
Yeah.
But it happens in multiple phases. And it happens in understanding and becoming aware of where you are right now. And that's like a basic coaching inquiry, right? Like, where are you right now? Where do you want to be? But in this instance, we want to look at, where are you right now? Like, how are you actually viewing time? Do you have a dysfunctional relationship with time? If you do, let's just acknowledge that, right? Like, there are places in our life with these phases to first become aware of, acknowledge that they are our current reality, and then ask ourselves questions. What would it take to get me into the reality that I do want? And the shift actually happens over all of those phases altogether. So the first one, let's say when I start to talk to a woman about her relationship with time, I ask them all, what do you think? What comes up for you? What do you feel in your body when I say the phrase, time is precious? And it doesn't matter who it is. There's just different feelings, different thoughts, different sensations that every single woman, every single person comes up with when they hear that. Some are super positive. Some they start to feel grief about potentially all the times in their life where they didn't use time in a way they wish they would. And these indicators of what is coming up for you in that moment are really important and fun and amazing to pay attention to. They're cues that will get us closer to what we actually want. So my work, I always say, is I'm not here to teach you how to make 10K in 30 days. I'm here to help you be on an awareness journey. This is an awareness journey for all of us. So when we start to talk about that shift from mainstream understanding of time is scarce to a new perspective of there's actually so much time that I get to have, that I get to play with, that I get to work with, that if I just use it right and I have the right mindset around it, I can get way more done in so much quicker time.
No, I feel that for sure. You mentioned earlier how we basically have a finite amount of time, right? Obviously, one of the only guarantees of life is that life is going to end for us, right? And for some people, again, that is like a dreadful kind of thing. But I always like to turn to the Stoics, who had a quote that says, it's like a mantra that goes memento mori, which I'm sure you might have heard at some point, which is essentially saying you're going to die at some point, which doesn't mean that you don't have to care about anything, but that things aren't that big a deal in the regards of the things that occupy your time. And if you want something and it is a big deal to you, you should start acting to it, because it's tomorrow's not guaranteed for you, and I feel like that's kind of the underlying theme of what you're trying to get to people is, even though it's scarce, it's still, you have so much time to actually do the things you want to do, right?
Absolutely. I love that. And I could learn way more from the Stoics now that you mention that. And there is another really beautiful element to this shift. It's like, yes, understanding the philosophy around what you just said is really important. But there's a difference between understanding something with our mind and then knowing it with our body. And so part of that shift in going from time is scarce, there's not enough, to time has a certain amount and I can do everything I want with it, we have to understand from a body perspective that that's true as well. Our minds can think it's true all day long, but our bodies have to think that as well. That's why in this phased approach that I'm talking to you about, we become aware of our thoughts and our feelings in our body at the same time. And we start to feel and process what those feelings are, because there's an intelligence in our body that a lot of us are unfortunately disconnected from, just as a result of society, the way we were brought up, the glorification of the mind and the sight, right? When we can start to become more aware of what's in our bodies, then our body starts to come online and believe that as well. And then when we have a goal, our mind knows what the goal is, but our body is ready to move toward it as well. Our body stops being the thing that stops us from accomplishing our goals.
That's basically the disconnect of, you want to do this thing, like losing weight, for example. You got to work out and do this stuff, but when it's time to go to the gym, you don't really feel like it. You're not really, motivated to go, and you kind of just sit in the car and drive back home, basically, right?
Yep. Your mind is like, yeah, let's do this. And your body's like, I don't think so.
Not today. So what's the disconnect there? How do you, I know you mentioned the 3-phase shift, but where does it, I can't imagine, how can I say this? It's a 3-phase shift. It's something you go through over time and you create awareness around, but how do you actually get your body to that point eventually in a, pragmatic sense? What's the actual step-by-step, if you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I'll say overall, it starts with being willing to create a relationship with your body. And of course, you're in an industry where it's really important to create a relationship with your body. So that happens on multiple levels. So a lot of the prompts that I ask people, I'll say, what do you think about this? But what do you feel about this? So when we start to ask, what do we feel about something, that automatically starts to get us into our body. Because what is the thing that's doing the feeling? It's our nervous system, right? And so the relationship that we have with our nervous system is one of oh my gosh, we hold a lot of history in our nervous system and in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about the disconnect of having a goal and not being able to accomplish it because our body's not ready to do that, it means there is something our body needs or is trying to tell us that we need to understand with our mind. And so prompts, how do I feel about this? Getting a mentor to walk you through your feelings, right? Like, not everyone's nervous system is ready to start feeling because
Right.
there's a lot of trauma in there, whether it's from a big trauma from your life or whether it's from mini traumas throughout your life. Getting a mentor to help you start to feel that. A lot of us are really great at not feeling, whether that be with alcohol or scrolling our Instagram feeds, watching Netflix. Of course, everything in moderation, but if we are numbing out on a daily basis, then that's our indication that we're not comfortable feeling something. And so how to go about that disconnect is just to start really having a relationship with your body and your nervous system. And there are thousands of ways to start to do that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It reminds me of what I do with my clients. I'm a nutrition coach, and we get in tune with how much you're eating, right? And when I first start working with someone new, we create awareness around food in terms of how much they're eating, what types of food they're choosing, how many calories they're eating, that kind of thing. But I also make it a point to make sure that they're aware of how they feel before and after each food decision that they make, because that is always going to be the greater telltale sign and going to give us more direction toward the root cause of what led you to your weight gain in the first place.
Yeah, if we're not in touch with how we feel, then we're not going to be able to make change, not lasting change at least.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's definitely right. You could go through all emotions, but if it's not at its deepest level, you're going to end up going back to those old patterns once again.
Yeah, we underestimate the body. It is a powerful thing. And I respect my body so much. And I laugh sometimes because my mind will be like, I'm going to do this thing. And my body's like, no, I'm not ready to do that. And then I'm like, no, but I'm going to make you. And my body ends up telling me and proving to me, like, no, I'm not ready to do that. Or when I'm ready to make a big decision in my life, my body is the thing that moves towards it and my mind needs to catch up. Like, that's how much respect and like relationship I have with my body these days.
Yeah, wow, that's next level. Most people aren't at that level, but that's ultimately where you want to get to, right? Is having that back and forth conversation between body and mind and coming to that understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So now going back to time and use of time, I think in today's day and age, as a ingraining of society, we have come to a point where productivity is our most important thing. We're always trying to be productive and accomplish so many things. But do you find a different way to define productivity the same way you kind of find a different way to define time? What does productivity mean to you and the people you work with?
Yeah, in my world, productivity is the same. I approach it a little differently. I think a lot of people approach productivity with, here are the things I have to do. And if I don't do them, I'm going to feel like crap. If I don't do them, if I can't do them, that it means, at the deepest level, it means I'm not valuable. And yes, obviously, I run back to that version every now and then if I'm not having a great day, right? Like I'm being really hard on myself. But in my world, productivity is more of an empowering thing. I feel less trapped. I feel less of a prisoner to the word productivity because of the way I operate and how I look at my time. So to answer your question, productivity is the same in my world. We just approach it a little differently, by being on top of our time, by being in command of our time, by being in command of our boundaries. And productivity becomes a really rewarding and beautiful thing.
I like how you said you're less of a prisoner to productivity, because that goes back to the feeling thing, right? Because I'm sure a lot of people, when they heard the word productivity, they're like, oh, I have all this stuff I got to do. And they remembered their to-do list as they were listening to this. And it created this, again, entrapment that we mentioned earlier. But what is this approach that creates this empowering feeling that you're talking about?
Okay, I'm just going to go through like the steps in my program, right? Because
Okay.
we're talking about steps and I'm trying to keep it general, but I think it's really important to just like, we'll just go through, and these seem basic, right? These are going to seem basic. So the first thing, shift your relationship with time. Understand that time is a resource that can work for you. You could be the boss of it. And you can be in control of your time. You can actually be on top of it. You could feel good about it. You could feel spacious. You could get a lot done at the same time. So that's the first thing. We work on that. Second thing is, I go through with people how to understand the brain, attention span, energy usage, because that's really going to affect when our energy is low or when our energy is too high. If we're trying to work when our energy is low, or if we're trying to work when our energy is too high, we're just going to burn our energy a lot faster. So there are ways to understand how the brain works, how we use our attention. A lot of the way that society uses attention is you write down 10 things to do and you do those 10 things. It's not that easy. I mean, it should be that easy, but if you don't know how your brain needs to operate, it's not going to be easy as you want it to be, right? Like one of my mentors tells me, you've done a really great job at finding all these strategies to get these things done, but there could be an easier way to do it. You don't have to reach around these other things that you have a hard time with. You could deal with the things you have a hard time with, clear those things, and then you have a straightforward path to getting that done. How much easier do you think that's going to be for you? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. We're really good at creating those workaround strategies, but at the end of the day, it's not sustainable for us. So the second thing is I have people understand their brain. And we don't go into, neuroscience like crazy. We just do some simple stuff. And there are a lot of people that come to me and say, I was diagnosed with a learning disability. I've been told I'm slow. I've been told I'm nonverbal learner. And there are, while I do recognize some people do have disabilities and things that hold them back, I was diagnosed with something like a learning disability myself at one point. I do show a lot of these people the world in which they don't have a disability. They just haven't understood how they needed to work, how their brain worked differently from other people. And it frees up so much in their identity and what they think they're capable of. So I said, change your relationship with time. That's what we work on. The second thing is we talk about the brain, energy patterns, attention span. The third thing we talk about are desires. So a lot of what society does is we do things and we be productive based off of other people's desires or what we think would make other people happy. And a lot of us, even that think we're not doing that, we're still doing that in some way or another. So the awareness journey that I talked about is just to become aware. If what I'm doing is driven by trying to prove something to someone, we become aware of those things. So we get you in touch with your actual desires, and sometimes that requires us to peel back layers and layers and layers of what you think you want and getting straight towards what you actually want. A lot of people are very surprised when those core desires start coming out of their heart. They're like, oh my God, I want that? What? And I'm like, yeah, it sounds like you do. And then they're just completely freed. So that's the third step, desires. The fourth one is boundaries. This is one of the biggest ones that a lot of us have a hard time with. I share in a lot of my content, your boundaries can only be as strong as how strong you perceive yourself to be. So for anyone struggling with boundaries, it's very often because there's an identity piece in you that thinks you don't deserve to have that strong boundary. So I have my women look at that as well. How to communicate boundaries in a really empowered and loving way. How to make yourself available only when you want to make yourself available to your clients. We have those conversations. And then after the boundaries, I think that was number 4, we go into number 5, which is my personal planning system that is actually set up to accommodate to evolution, to the concept of evolution. Everything is always changing, right? So I'm not going to tell you to use this to-do list and expect you to use it 3 months from now. You're probably not going to want to use it 3 months from now because it's just not the way we work, right? A lot of people come to me and say, oh, I was using this system and I abandoned it after 2 weeks and I don't know what's wrong with me. And I go, no, you abandoned it because everything evolves. So the planning system I use, of course, it hooks into a bigger vision of what you're really here to do. Like I ask you, what are you really here to do? We figure that out. We get really specific with it, specific goals. And then we go in and we start to like plan your weeks and plan your life with that system. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that is the process I take people through.
No, that definitely answers it in a cool way. That's basically the approach, and that the exact step-by-step is going to vary for everybody, right? They're going to have different desires, different energies, different systems that are going to work for them, but those are the guiding principles you have for every person you work with, right?
100%. This whole system works no matter who you apply it to. And that's why I wanted to make this, because we all realize at this point, cookie cutter doesn't work.
Right.
Not even in our marketing, not even in our coaching approaches. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Individualization, I think, is always the way to go, because not everyone is going to be a square that fits into a square hole. You know, you got to have different plans for different people. But I really liked, I want to kind of go through each one step by step and touch on them, because each one I had something I want to ask. So with step 2, talked about going into your brain, understanding your attention span and understanding your energy levels, right? And I think I have a hard time connecting that with how you plan your week at the same time, because from what I'm getting from what you said, it's understanding where you feel and working in alignment with that. But if you plan your week in advance, if one day you feel you have more energy than you had anticipated when you planned your week, how are you going to approach that? You know, how are you going to, I feel like that's counterintuitive. It doesn't really mesh well together, but you're the expert. Let me hear what you have to say with that.
Yeah, great question. So when we're learning more about ourselves and how we need to work, right? Because we're different from the next person, we start to understand patterns in how we work. So when we are understanding that, you know, I actually, and me specifically, I'll use me as an example. I don't know anyone like this. I have the most crazy amount of energy from 2:30 in the morning to 4 o'clock in the morning.
A.M.?
A.M.
Yeah.
Very inconvenient for,
yeah.
you know, for a day-loving entrepreneur, right? But I found a place where it's actually quite convenient for me, and it's actually become a little fun for me, and I still get a full night's sleep despite that happening for me, right? So I know as a pattern, and here's another pattern. I know this happens 70% of the time. This is how much I pay attention to my body and like what's going on. 70%, so 7 out of 10 nights, I will wake up anywhere from 2:30 to 3 a.m. and then I'll be able to go back to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. And what I do with that, I've only really just begun to figure out if I'm going to be like working or if I'm just going to sit there and daydream, right? Like, or if I'm going to, sometimes I pull out my phone and I just start writing crazy notes of stuff that's coming into my head.
Right.
So what we start to do with the system is understand our own specific patterns, and when our energy is the highest, when it's the lowest, choosing to trust that, right? Like if I actually don't prefer to work from 9 a.m. to, let's say, 2 to 3 p.m. And I get really creative around 5 to 10 p.m. And that's just not how we were brought up, you know? Like we were brought up to say, you wake up, you do your morning routines, you get ready for the day, you are at your most optimal level from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., maybe a crazy coffee break at 3 p.m., then you go home, you watch TV, and then you go to bed. I am the complete, if you took that and you ripped it into 1,000 pieces and threw it in a hat and threw it on the ground, that's my day, you know? Like, it's scattered.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't going to work for you at all.
Exactly. To answer your question, we can start to see that we have patterns in how we like to work. So when we pay attention to those patterns, that's going to give us a good idea of what our week needs to look like. When we start to lay out our week, granted, we are respecting our boundaries and how we actually desire to work, and we're working on the things we want to work on. When we lay out our week and we realize on a Wednesday that I scheduled something at 2 p.m. and I no longer feel like doing it, there are two ways I could go here, right? There's no better way. There's no should or shouldn't. The first way is I honor that time commitment and I work through it because I said I would be there. And if it's a high priority, if it's a revenue generating activity, if it is something that someone's relying me to do, then I'm most likely going to do it, even though my energy might feel a little low. I'm willing to take that, that small sacrifice, which in the long run is more rewarding because somebody was relying on me, etc. Right? The other route I could take with that is, what's the priority of this meeting or this task? Is it a low priority? Is it something I can move to an hour later? Is it something I can move to tomorrow? Again, my boundaries are intact. I'm working on what I want to work on. I have agreements with the people around me that sometimes things are going to change, right? Like, I'm not a flaky person whatsoever. I very highly value my time. I value yours. I value my word, etc. But I'm still able to see my patterns. And in these moments where I'm like, I don't know today. Maybe I'm feeling sick. Sometimes I will choose to move it an hour later or cancel it or reschedule it to another day. And the way I've set up the rest of my week allows me to have the space to do that.
So you already plan in advance for these possible interruptions where you don't feel like doing it, right?
100%.
All right. And you put air quotes around "don't feel like doing it." What was the purpose of that?
Remember we were talking about the mind-body connection? Right? Like, you can hear what your mind is saying, but are you connected to your body and what your body wants? When I do air quotes and around when you don't feel like doing something, it's also good to become aware of when you don't feel like doing something. Is it your body not having enough energy, or is it your mind trying to make excuses? And we have a responsibility to understand and discern which one of those it is.
So that's basically like when you don't feel like doing it, and if you're not aware of it, it could be you going back to those coping mechanisms, turning on Netflix, scrolling through the phone and just avoiding the work you're supposed to do entirely. Yeah,
absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
Nice. Okay. So creating that awareness becomes really important. Now, the other side of it, from step 2, is the attention span, right? So I think attention spans now are notoriously low than they have been in previous years, or at least that's what they report. I don't know if we know that for sure. How do you work with someone that claims they don't have a really good attention span, or has a poor one and wants to make it better?
Yes, so I will actually use a couple of my clients who have legitimate energy issues, learning disabilities, disorders. Because for anyone who doesn't have a learning disability or disorder, you really have no excuse compared to some of these ladies. One of them, she is on the autism spectrum. And she had been explaining to me, how she works throughout the day, where she, quote unquote, gets in trouble with not getting things done. And I was listening to her, and she explained to me, sometimes when she goes into a task and she has a whole day's worth of tasks planned, she'll go into that task and she'll zone in on the task and completely lose track of time. And 5 hours later, she'll have missed 3 meetings. She doesn't have a concept of time. That's what she says. So with her, what we identified is what works best for her is if she only creates one type of task per day. So if her task is only writing for the whole day, rather than writing for 1 hour and showing up to an appointment the next hour, we apply the whole day to writing, so that if she's going to write and she's going to get lost in her writing, she's allowed to do that freely without worrying about other meetings.
I like that.
Yeah. So I forgot your question, but I kind of zoned in on the zone in story.
But no, we were saying how to work on attention span for people that claim they don't have a great attention span. So that's basically identifying patterns, and using that to your advantage is one way, is what you said.
Yep. And really just knowing you really are on top of how you need to design your day and your weeks. And so if you think you have a lower attention span, work with what it is. Don't think that you need to adhere to somebody else's planning system, somebody else's time blocking, somebody else's version of productivity. Pretend like, I love saying this, pretend like you're a child learning how to walk. And if you had a little brother or sister or a daughter or a son and you're teaching them how to walk and they fall, you're not going to yell at them and tell them to do it a certain way. You're going to look at them and figure out how they need to get it done compared to somebody else, right? Like different people learn how to walk and ride bikes differently, and you're going to accommodate to how they need to learn that. So why would you treat yourself any different?
I love that analogy. That's actually a really great analogy, because then if you've ever been in that position, you know that you can't force a child to know how to heel to toe or do whatever. They're going to end up figuring it out with their own balances. You just got to be supportive of that.
Exactly. I wish we would do that for ourselves. We need to do that for ourselves.
We lose touch of that inner child mentality a lot of the time, and it's always what we need at some point to get back to what we want to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
Man, so the third part of your thing was desires, and I really like this one because this one I learned early on from a mentor, like one of my early mentors, and it was basically called me out and said I was putting more on my plate that I didn't need to do and didn't want to do, and it wasn't actually benefiting me. And when I kind of took out all the noise, I was able to be more productive because I was working on the things that mattered, things that felt good, things that actually helped people, and I was, the meaningless tasks that were just kind of for show, also kind of weird procrastinating activities that helped me feel productive but weren't actually making me productive, were thrown aside, and I was able to accomplish so much more. How do you get someone, again, it's always going to go back to like digging in and finding those desires, but how do you help people create more of that awareness for this specific idea of what's important, what's not important, what's serving you, what's not serving you?
Yeah, it's a lot simpler than I think it is, than a lot of people think it is. I'm just in conversation with someone talking about what they're currently working on, and they tell me where breakdowns are happening. So for instance, I talked to a girlfriend yesterday, and she was like, oh, she didn't know about my work or my program because we're just now starting to get to know each other. And she goes, oh, time management, productivity, that sounds awesome. She did the thing. She goes, oh, I need that,
Yeah.
And she's like, I have a question for you. I've got all this stuff and I'm doing this and I'm, this isn't working. And I'm like, okay, well, what's not working? Like, what about what you're doing is not working? She goes, well, I'm dropping balls everywhere. And I have to do these follow-up emails, and I don't want to do those. So we were getting really specific. So a lot of times in this conversation, we just need to get as specific as possible. What are the things that are making you feel like you're dreading to do? Ask yourself that. What do you dread about what you're about to do, about what you're doing, about your work? And then the second thing I asked her, and I'm like, okay, well, if you don't want to do that, why are you doing it? And she's like, oh, great question. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, then I think maybe I'm just going to stop the coaching side to my business and just keep doing like the startup side and do this other side. And she decided in that moment. It was very simple, actually. She's like, I have the ability to just stop doing coaching because it's taking up a lot of my time. I'm spending hours on these follow-up emails. She's like, yeah, I'm just not going to do that. And I go, awesome. That sounds like a great thing to do for yourself. And then you could just see like a lot of things opened up in that moment, as far as like her time and what she would be able to do with it after that. So.
Right. That's really cool because we get caught up in like just doing things because it's on our to-do list and that kind of thing and going through the motions. We forget to ask ourselves why we're even doing it in the first place, and we don't even need to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. One example, I have been doing Clubhouse Rooms for about 2 months now. And it was around feminine embodiment. It was around boundaries, goals, and healing. And it was fun. And then at some point, the Clubhouse algorithm changed. You could tell like there weren't as many women coming into the room. I was getting an average about 4 followers on Instagram per room, which was my metric. I'm like, this activity is going to be worth it for me if I at least get 4 followers per room. And that was actually happening. And I started to feel the energy like kind of like getting lower. I started another room with some other ladies and it was just at its lowest point. And I just had to ask myself, like, I really love that I'm meeting great potential clients and other women on this platform, but for the time it's taking me to do this and the value I'm getting out of it and the value they're getting out of it, because I wasn't able to give that much value. You know, other people are talking.
Right.
I'm not really good with like talking at people. I'm good with talking with people. And Clubhouse is more of a talking at people kind of thing in my experience.
Right.
And I just let the ladies know last night. I'm like, hey, I'm no longer going to be able to do my role in these rooms. I think that my time is going to be spent better serving people elsewhere. And they were totally cool with it. But that's me checking out my own desires in real time. Like I could have went 3 more months doing these rooms because it was quote unquote the thing to do and it would get me some leads here or there.
Mm-hmm.
But my body wasn't in it anymore. I was like, ugh, it's just like, what are we doing, guys?
Man,
I stopped doing it.
it's funny because I went through the same thing, and you put into words what I felt without me realizing it. I don't like talking at people. I like talking with people. And that's really what I was, whenever I got into a Clubhouse room, it felt like a chore. I always liked listening into them, but actually being one of the moderators was like, I don't want to be here. So that really, you just clicked the light bulb for me, because I always like doing podcasts. I like being one-on-one, but that environment was just not it for me.
Yeah, and I love that you noticed that right now, right? Because that's also part of this process. There are some people who completely thrive talking at other people and informing them of things. Mm-hmm. And then there are some people who completely thrive in the one-on-one back and forth. I literally, I could start my own podcast right now, just doing solo episodes. Mm-hmm. It drains my energy so fast, though, because there's nobody there to mm-hmm. talk with.
Yeah, no, I feel that for sure. I love that. Man, thanks for letting me realize that. But okay, next one I wanted to get to, which is a really big one that I think a lot of people struggle with, is boundaries, right? And I'm sure this is one of the biggest issues, because for a lot of people, and I'm speaking from personal experience, when we think boundaries, it's basically like, it has a negative connotation, right? Setting hard boundaries kind of has a negative connotation for people that aren't really used to it. And it feels like, oh, I won't be able to help my friends. I won't be able to help my family, or if they need me, that kind of thing. But how can boundaries actually help you do that better and help you be, more productive for yourself too?
Yeah, huge question. There's a lot in this, right? Because I mentioned earlier, our boundaries are who we are. Mm-hmm. And if we really look at ourselves as a human being, there's a lot there. There's family history, there's nervous system, like the state of our nervous system, there's the state of our mindset, the state of our overall health, the state of our friendships, the state of our relationships in business. So boundaries are literally everywhere in our life because it's who we are, and it's a way to reinforce who we are, and it's a way to create our world with these different standards of who we want to be and how we want to operate. That said, when we're looking at our work, when we're looking at our time and being efficient, I'll start there. Mm-hmm. The first thing I ask people, again, is to ask, where are the places in which your boundaries may seem a little weak? And let's start to ask ourselves why. Let's get really real with what that is and why that is. The why could be thousands of reasons. It could be because I don't value myself in a certain area of my life yet. I'm working on that. It could be because I really feel obligated to this person, and I feel like if I don't help them, maybe this bad thing will happen, right? Like maybe some people-pleasing tendencies. It could be, it could be something because of family dynamic, right? Like that could be a whole episode in and of mm-hmm. itself. Like for the people who grew up in a family where they really relied on each other, and it could be actually slightly dysfunctional and entangled as far as dependencies goes, right? Like codependent relationships with our family. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge factor in understanding our boundaries as well as that, and that does get in the way of us being able to be efficient in our work. So all of that said, where do you want me to go with this? Because there's so much.
So I guess one of the common themes with all of those is when you decide to set that boundary with these people, you have a sense of worry of how they're going to feel, if you're still going to be able to have a good relationship with that, and you're going to maybe even feel some guilt internally with that. How can you confidently set a boundary that you know is going to help both of you without the negative feelings associated with it, or learning to cope with those negative feelings?
Okay. So the first thing I would say is, in the boundary game, understand that there are two worlds. And at any one point, you're either playing in one world or the other world. And it's not bad whether you're playing in one world or the other world. Just know where you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be in the other world, know how to get there. Figure out how to get there, right? So the first world is the world in which we think that we are obligated to other people. A world in which we do feel a little trapped and disempowered in our time and how we are giving our time to other people. In a world where boundary setting is hard. In a world where boundary setting is confusing and difficult to approach. The other world is a world where boundary setting is actually quite easy. It's enjoyable. It feels freeing. It's a non-issue. I do it because I have to. I do it because they need me to do it. I need them to do it as well, right? Like it becomes a very normalized way of being, something that enables you to be more of who you are, something that actually feels good. So the two worlds, just know which world you're playing in when you are talking about boundaries. Now, if you become aware of the world you're playing in and you're playing in the world that doesn't feel that great, there is totally a way to get to the other side. Totally a way. How do we get to the other side? Is that your next question?
You're like a mind reader. How do you know I would say that?
How do we get to the other side? Oh my gosh, how do I answer this in like a non-phased approach? It's all about phases, you know? Mm-hmm. Because awareness happens in phases. You don't just open your eyes and then you pop into a new level of consciousness of who you are.
Right.
No. Things and themes and situations get revealed to us over time. They unfold in their own timing. So if we want to go from the world of disempowered boundaries and feeling guilt around our boundaries, and we want to go to a world of feeling empowered about our boundaries, we really got to do the work of looking at how much we value ourselves. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of that, how much we don't value ourselves. Mm-hmm. So when I say that to you right now, is there anything that comes up?
I mean, the idea that comes to mind is that if you are always giving your time to other people, it's because you value their time more than your own time. That's the thought that comes to my mind initially.
Yeah, I would agree. And then my next question would be like, and not to you, to anyone in general, like, mm-hmm. Why do you value their time more than yours? Why does it have to be an either or thing? Mm-hmm. Right? And so then we just go deeper and deeper and deeper and start to look at how we value ourselves, where we value ourselves in our life, where we don't value ourselves in our life, why we value ourselves in that one area, why we don't, right? We just keep asking questions and we become mm-hmm. aware of what is really going on in here that is having us live a world where we are afraid of asking for what we want, where we are afraid of telling someone that we're not okay with something, when we're afraid of telling someone that we have a different preference in how we want to experience the relationship with them, whether we're okay with telling someone that our prices have raised.
Mm-hmm. I like this. I really, first of all, I gotta say, I was just thinking, I'm very appreciative to have you on the show. You're like the perfect person to have, because everything you're saying is pretty simple and straightforward, but it's not easy, right? It's still definitely like internal work that you have to work through, but it's not as difficult or as complicated as people might have thought before they heard what you had to say.
Yeah, we are very complex creatures. And there is a way to turn all of this complexity into simplicity, right? Like when we've got the right mentors and all of that. But yeah, I love that I'm on here too. I just geek out about this stuff all day long.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the two other things that I really want to point out that you said, one is the idea of having a coach and a mentor, because we have a strong bias to everything that we do, and we can easily talk ourselves in and out of any feeling that we have without even realizing it's harming us or helping us. And having that third party perspective to, put us back on our intended path is going to expedite everything so much more efficiently for us and ease our stress and everything. I think like it's such a valuable and underappreciated aspect of a life's journey, really, just having someone that you can turn to help you see what you're actually doing and give you that feedback.
Yeah, 100%. I have two mentors, coaches at any one point in the year. And when I finish a coaching relationship, I get a new one or I renew with that. Like I am just like constantly seeing myself in the mirror and like where am I BSing myself? Where am I unable to be even more present with my clients? Like that is my biggest drive. If I'm not able to be present with my clients as much as like they deserve and they need, and they don't need me per se, but like if I'm in a relationship where I'm supposed to show up with someone and I'm unable to show up because of the work that I haven't done, that really bothers me. And so, yeah, I agree. Mentorship and coaching is like such a necessity.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Okay, well, we're coming pretty close to the end of our time, so I want to be respectful of your time. But for everyone that is listening and wants to see more of what you do, Lauren, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at lauren.nicole.peters. And you can also find me on Facebook, Lauren Nicole Peters. And you can also find me on my website, www.yourperfectweek.com.
Awesome. And I'm going to link everything in the show notes so anyone listening can get to that right away. And one last question for you before I let you go. This is the Not So Stupid podcast, and we focus on simple habits, simple actionable items that can help you become the best version of yourself. What is one simple thing that you can tell the listeners that they can start doing to help make their weeks a little more perfect?
The first moments of your day upon opening your eyes in the morning, give those moments to yourself, almost as if you were gifting someone something for their birthday. Because that day is yours. The day is yours. Even if you have children, that day is yours first. And so even if it's the first 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 minutes, allow yourself to give that to yourself. Allow yourself to really get in touch with your body. Say, hello, body. Touch your arms, squeeze your legs. Say, I'm here. Get really present in the moment. Breathe. Get in tune with the quality of your breath. And then jump out of bed and do your day. If you could elongate that process, you will feel the effects throughout the day and throughout your weeks. But my biggest practice that I even have to remind myself to do is give myself the day. Whenever I open my eyes, this day is mine. And I share this day with God. In my own perspective, this day is mine and God's, and I'm going to be here and as present as I possibly can. So that's what I would give your listeners.
Oh, I love that. I hope everyone takes that, and if they didn't fully understand it, rewind it and listen to it again so that they can apply it tomorrow morning after this, after everything you had to say. But thank you again, Lauren, for your time. I'm very much appreciative of it. I learned a lot. I'm sure the listeners learned a lot as well. And again, make sure you check out Lauren on her platforms. But thank you again for your time, and thank you everyone that's listening, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.